Let's go, Mountaineer Nation. Thanks for tuning in to another edition of Fox on West Virginia Mountaineer Sports. And I know we're all excited for West Virginia baseball's first ever appearance in the College Baseball World Series. Game 1 against Troy, starting off at noon on Friday. We're still in baseball mode, but now we've reached the beginning of June, and I haven't talked that much about college football, specifically for West Virginia, over the course of the last probably 5 months, outside of the West Virginia Spring Football Festival. It's kind of the way the world used to be before it got so super intense into sports media and analyzing 365 days a year what's going on with roster management, recruiting, the games. It seems like when players come back from Christmas break in January, we're talking about winter conditioning and how guys are going to be, changing their body types, getting bigger, faster, stronger. Then we're talking about spring practice, then the spring game, what's going on with over summer. And then, of course, we turn our attention right around this time of the year to recruiting, because with the way that the recruiting calendar has changed over the course of the last decade, that June is a very pivotal month in terms of having on-campus camps, having on-campus visitors, that once you get to about mid-July, that you get into a period where you're focused on your training camp, your current year's team. So a lot of players like to have their official visits locked in for the summer season before then they go back to their respective high school programs, play out their high school seasons. Many times over half or so enroll early, and they're on campus in January. So the recruiting calendar, as we know, has been just moved up and up and up. And we haven't had a chance, with just head coach Rich Rodriguez's second year in his second stint at West Virginia. We haven't talked a whole lot about high school recruiting beyond what West Virginia did for this last cycle. And let's start it off with that point in time, is that last year's cycle was absolutely pivotal, and we don't know just yet about how all of these high school freshmen are going to pan out. I think I have my about 5 or so that I think that can be standouts and contribute valuable time in 2026. But today we're going to talk about 2027 and kind of how this class is already starting to shape up and how that plays into West Virginia's bigger picture of roster management for looking forward into these now later years of Coach Rodriguez's second stint in Morgantown. So if you like me, want to support me and all I'm doing for this channel, and I really appreciate that, please hit that thumbs up button. A like helps out the algorithm so that more Mountaineer fans can see this video across YouTube, and would love to have you a subscriber to my channel. Doesn't sign you up for anything, doesn't cost you anything, just helps out the cause. Then you'll get push notifications to know when my videos go live or post every single time that they post, so that you can tune in. So right now, as of June 9th, West Virginia football has 15 commitments, the 39th highest rated class in the country, according to On3 Rivals, the 4th highest in the Big 12. Not popping off the page, but it wasn't really until things changed in the late stretch of probably like last December or so, when and even it was really December, whenever the season ended, that West Virginia received the commitment of Kevin Brown, then got the commitment, the flip, but for both players, both Kevin Brown, Matt Sieg, then the flip from Wisconsin to West Virginia for Amari Latimer, that the rating for the West Virginia high school class jumped all the way to 20th. And then with the total volume of what West Virginia brought in, I think that gave West Virginia the benefit of the doubt to have a top 20 class. And people make highest rated ratings from websites like On3 Rivals, 247 Sports. They make what you want to make of them. Doesn't always tell the story, but for right now, West Virginia, 39th in the country, outside of the top 25, where that is where you start to build that type of program-changing talent being on the outside looking in. One blue chipper, that's 4-star cornerback Carter Bonner out of St. Francis Academy in Baltimore, Maryland, who previously attended Penn Hills High School outside of Pittsburgh, Monroeville area. So not all that far away from me. What I'll say is I'm just trying to look at this in the greater landscape of roster management and how Chuck Lilly, Coach Rodriguez, how this plays into their strategy now for 2027 and beyond. Because I started with my handy-dandy spreadsheet that I track all of the players, positions, years of eligibility, scholarship, etc. Only 23 of West Virginia's 121 guys that are currently on the 2026 football roster will run out of eligibility in 2026. And if the 5 years to play 5 seasons rule passes, that number drops to only 15, as 8 WVU football players will receive another year of eligibility. So 15 guys is truly a very small senior class when you think about it. This portal class going into 2026, transfer player guys, only have 15 one-year guys, whereas a year and a half ago, going into the 2025 season, West Virginia brought in 31. So you could argue that Chuck Lilly, Coach Rod, the entire recruiting staff, assistant coaching staff, really said, let's play the long game out here more with this transfer class, wanting to build with a foundation of a 50-member high school and JUCO recruiting class to build for 2027. That these guys are going to get a ton of playing experience in 2026. West Virginia is going to probably work in a whole lot of guys just like they did last year until they kind of settle in the back half of the season, maybe even into taking as long into November to find out truly who are their starters. So I when people try and ask me like, who do you think is going to be the quarterback this upcoming September, try and project the two deep, that I still think we're going to have a lot of movement all throughout the month of September. Especially those first 2 games. We might just, see who rises to the top of the pack the fastest, like we saw in the backyard brawl this past year for the neutral site game in Charlotte, North Carolina against Virginia, and then just go from there. Winging a prayer week in by week out to see who's performing in practice, then it translating on fall Saturdays. I think that's kind of the way, most teams operate, but it's just like there's been so much movement. There's been so much fluctuation to West Virginia's roster for the better part of 2 years now that it would be nice to have more of a formalized 2 deep. But I think for the picture for 2027 will look a whole lot clearer a year from now than it is today, where I still think there are a lot of players who are around the same talent level that you just have to see what they do out in the field, provide them with the opportunity, and they're either going to prove it or they're not, and someone else gets another opportunity. Where I'm interested with this is Coach Rodriguez has said in the past that he would like to see West Virginia even out in terms of having a majority of the team being returning players, then high school recruits, then transfer players. Somewhere in the terms, I've heard him say, or Coach Chuck Lilly say in the ballpark, you can kind of make out from what they say, about 60% returning players, 25% high school recruits, 15% transfer players, and that kind of pans out for what's happening to the Big 12 right now. Now, this was talked a lot about during the NFL draft back in April, so if you missed that or something you don't really care about, there is a funneling of talent up to the SEC and Big Ten. And unfortunately, the ACC and the Big 12 are kind of stuck in the middle, and then there's the G6 that is getting completely wiped out of top high-end talent. For 2026, according to CBS Sports, the Big 12 teams average a 57% returning production rate. So that just means right there that whenever you think of what Coach Rodriguez is projecting, about 60% of the players return, for 57% in the case of the Big 12. That's a little above the average at 60%. So when you think about it, at West Virginia, has a 50-man JUCO and high school class. 20 of those 50 are going to be either cut, they're going to go to another, or they're going to be transferring up to the SEC Big Ten, or they're just not going to, they're not going to be here next season. So it sucks that there's just so much movement, but that is kind of the hand that West Virginia is dealt in today's world of college football, with unlimited free agency and no rules, fewer and fewer by the day, or ones that there's no enforcement mechanism. Until we see a shakeup and realignment with the new television deals for West Virginia to retain high-end talent, especially the kind of players that the SEC and or Big Ten deem worthy enough to deserve a roster spot, this is what's going to happen. I think this is why Coach Rod and Chuck Lilly are focused so much so on 2-year deals for some of their freshman recruits, and hearing some of the numbers for some of them, that I think kind of the intention of signing up front as high school players with the thought process they're going to give it their all. It's how you get a 5 and or 4-star to sign. Who knows what they're going to produce in year one? And I truly do hope that we're talking about each of those big 3 freshman recruits that West Virginia got, and Kevin Brown, Matt Sieg, and Amari Latimer are playing significant and productive snaps in 2026. But then it's the hope that then, because you've structured it as part of a 2-year deal, that, man, you really make your bang for your buck, if you want to call it that, as sophomores, to see if then that's when they really produce. Then you're talking about, okay, you really have to extend them very significant offers. You could let them walk if they don't develop in 2 years, but you're going to have to try and extend them if you want to keep them, either, for 2 more years, or at least 1, to avoid going to the NFL draft. This is new. This is new that West Virginia really hasn't had much to deal with over the course of the last 5 years with the evolution of NIL and the transfer portal, because West Virginia hasn't had that much high-end talent. We saw some players, of course, leave in 2024. CJ Donaldson going to Ohio State, Huddy Tuddy going to Illinois. But I think that was a wrinkle thrown into the equation because of Coach Rod coming in for Coach Brown. Whereas when we were talking about the early 2020 years, we were talking about a very disjointed, at arm's length, as Shane Lyons used to said, country roads trust relationship with the Mountaineer Athletic Club and the WVU Athletic Department. Now that it's all one cohesive entity, with the rev share component, with outside NIL dollars thrown on top of it, that now we're coming to a point that West Virginia will be able to prove itself as I would think, Big 12 contender and someone who can play ball in the greater landscape of college football if it can retain players like Kevin Brown, Matt Sieg, Amari Latimer, guys who come in as 4- and 5-star recruits, produce, and then can you retain them like the big boys do? Not get poached like Tyke Smith did from Georgia, not like Akeem Mesidor was by Miami. No, you keep those guys throughout their entire time in Morgantown, because you can pay them, you can compete for conference championships, you're developing them and putting them into the NFL draft. That's something that never materialized during Coach Brown's time, except for a certain few players, Dante Stills, Zach Frazier, Wyatt Milam. So when I look at this class, and I see that really there are 2 position groups that stand out to me that what West Virginia is targeting, because there is a smattering of over the position groups, 1 quarterback, 1 running back. I'm going to skip the groups I'm going to talk about. 1 offensive lineman, 2 interior defensive linemen, and then no safeties but 1 corner and Carter Bonner. So where has West Virginia put the bulk of its commitments out of the 15 so far? Wide receiver and linebacker. Very interesting to me. And the body types and skill sets especially of the wide receivers, are very intriguing to me as I look at my position group the wide receiver position group in my spreadsheet here for 2027. Is that it's very clear that what Coach Rodriguez likes to have, and makes sense having seen a lot of this same thing come to pass like in the early 2000s, is that West Virginia under Coach Rod really likes one big wide receiver. You look at it like this year, Prince Strawn, also a guy like Malachi Thompson that they got out of the high school ranks, 6'4", 190, Strawn 6'5", 210. Of course, Strawn's 4 years older from Malachi Thompson. But when I see a guy like Roscoe Hayes commit for West Virginia, who's 6'5", 195, that's what West Virginia wants to go get. They want to go get a big-bodied one who they can throw the ball, up and deep to. When I look back at this last year's team, that really became Jeff Weimer by season's end, Cam Vaughn, kind of similar fashion. And there are some guys who kind of fluctuate within that like 6'5" down to 6'1" size. Like I think Teron Francis is named man-child for a reason. John Nieder, 6'2", 195. And then a couple of the guys that they got out of this past year's class, kind of like, I want to say mid-size, if you want to compare it to a real big, tall, lanky kind of guy. And then where I want to focus on, what's really intriguing to me, is what West Virginia is doing with its scat backs. And these are guys that, watching the tape, tells a little bit different story than some of the projections or articles that I've read on three saying that this guy's going to play line or running back instead of receiver. And it's three guys that comes down to me. It's Jacoby Passley, Carter Davis, who West Virginia just received a commitment from a couple of days ago, and then Brian Duncan, the weekend of the regional in which West Virginia received a commitment flip from Kentucky to West Virginia on like the same day West Virginia beat Kentucky. So it was like, bam, 2 punches to the face on the Wildcats and Big Blue Nation. So these guys, in the case especially of Passley, might be the fastest player that I've seen full speed on game tape since probably like 2013. Oh man, I just had it here like in my notes, who West Virginia, they came to me. Mario Alford. I think that Jacoby Passley might be the fastest player I've seen on game film since Mario Alford. And I sometimes, and I fall into this same kind of trap sometimes when I see commitments, tapes that like, oh man, I think to myself, he looks just like Tavon Austin. No one's Tavon Austin. I feel like I've said that before. I'm not going to ever fall into that trap again. But Passley, is incredible. He has a second gear, and I thought the same thing 2024 Jaheim White, of the way that White could kind of hit the edge when he would get to the outside off tackle, and his speed down the sideline was just this second gear. I see that same kind of thing in Passley, and maybe a tenth of a second faster. He just really is impressing me. Davis looks longer. Like, he looks like a guy who has a torso that's about this size. His legs are just so long because you look at his size, and all three of these guys, Passley's 5'9", 165, Duncan is 5'9", 160, and Davis is 6 foot 170. So not overly big guys, especially the 5'9" guys, but their speed is just next level. I saw a post earlier today from Jeffrey Cobb on Twitter that said that all guys, I think, run a 10.5 in the 100 or faster. So, wow. I was just really impressed what popped off the page by me. But where I want to kind of give the other side of the coin is West Virginia is super deep at wide receiver in terms of total volume for 2027. And when you look at next year's wide receiving core, there won't be a single guy of the whole wide receiver roster that has had a single reception for West Virginia yet. So West Virginia is completely flipping over its wide receiver room. And I just don't know what to make of it yet. I don't know what to make of this passing offense just so far. I think we only saw a fraction of its capability this past season just because of everything that happened with the injury situation, from Nico Marchiol to Khalil Wilkins to Jalen Henderson to Max Brown, finally to Scotty Fox. We never got stability at the quarterback position because the offensive line couldn't keep anyone upright, couldn't provide any sort of time for a downfield passing attack. But if you look back at the statistics of the Jacksonville State team from 2024, that's what Tyler Huff was doing down for the Gamecocks, was throwing the ball deep. He was completing passes. I think I've referenced this stat before, is that he had the highest most yards per completion of anyone in FBS by the end of the regular season. So I want to see that on display this year. But I still know at the end of the day that this is going to be predominantly a run-based, heavy run team. And with Michael Hawkins, with Cam Cook, that this team is going to want to run the ball. Now, I don't think you can run the exact same kind of offense as you ran with Pat White and Steve Slayton in the mid-2000s that college football has evolved, that you have to have more to your RPO arsenal than what you just had as from a run game. So I don't know what to make of this wide receiver core just yet. I think I'll know a whole lot more come 2027. But right now, or come this season, seeing what they can do, who are some guys who rise to the top, I think we're going to see a lot of movement in the transfer portal at this position for next year, because there's just no way that West Virginia is going to keep, 16 wide receivers on its roster. There's too many mouths to feed and not enough ball to go around, especially if you're going to run the ball this much. I get it, keeping so many offensive linemen, and for right now, until you get stability at that quarterback position, I'm okay with West Virginia even holding on to 7 quarterbacks, even though I think that's way too many. Just the way they got hurt last year. We've got to see how this works out. Same thing with running backs. You have 9 on the for 2027. If Cam Cook gets another year's worth of eligibility and comes back and doesn't go pro, that's a lot of running backs. Then the other position I want to talk about is linebacker. West Virginia, of its 15 commitments, has 5 linebackers if you include the bandit on the outside. I know that's kind of like a hybrid down defensive end as well as a stand-up outside linebacker. But West Virginia has 4 guys I would deem to be interior, like inside linebackers, and then 1 bandit outside linebacker and Trevoris Finley at 6'2", 220, pass rusher. I think that West Virginia wants aggressive run stuffers who wreak havoc around the line of scrimmage or behind it. 2 guys who really stand out for me. For one, I really like Bronx Baker. I mean to tell you, he's a heat-seeking missile. Reminds me a little bit of David Long, a guy at 6'1", 215 who just does exactly. He's like a magnet. As soon as someone snaps the ball in the backfield, he's after him. And he's getting to the ball carriers at the line of scrimmage or behind it. Incredibly impressed. Wesley Flamer might even be a little bit faster, a step or 2, but I just like Baker's just toughness, aggression, gets the ball carrier down to the ground, doesn't let an arm tackle, let a player get out of his hands. So while I look at the group and I think to myself, okay, maybe a touch undersized at this point in time. Got to kind of constantly remind myself that these guys are, rising seniors, so they're probably around 17 years old, so that there's going to be more than enough time for them to put on, say, 20 pounds or so. In the case of Rick Brown III, if he could play up over 230 to 240, Bronx Baker the same kind of way, that's going to eventually be Power 4 level quality size. So I'm totally okay with it. And the way that West Virginia is putting the investment in this class in the interior defensive line, Dejor Webb from the WPIAL, my neck of the woods, 6'3", 320. I've said before, I'll say it again. There are very few things as a college football fan that I heterosexually love about West Virginia's team whenever there are big, meaty, 300-pound plus defensive linemen. Get as many of those guys, throw them in there. I want a Mount Cody from Alabama. I just want some, I forget who was the guy who was like 400 some pounds from Florida. Like you need those monsters on the inside, especially if West Virginia is going to continue with this 3-man front. You need some sort of 3-technique nose tackle who can, not a 3-technique, a nose tackle who can just neutralize the center at the point of the attack. And I think West Virginia has some interesting options. I'm really curious to see what the new JUCO guys in Jalen Thomas and KJ Henson do this season. And I think that the pair together of Nate Gabriel and Corey McIntyre were really coming into their own at the end of last season, that they're going to be those guys that are counted on as kind of the first wave, the first rotation, because West Virginia, excuse me, is not going to truly have just, on defense, 11 starters. They're going to rotate guys in, especially on that defensive line. So, I was really high coming into last season on Taylor Brown. So right there, that provides 4 or 5 guys on the interior line that I think that will make up that first and second rotation that's used during a game on the defensive line. And then, West Virginia will figure it out at the linebacker position, but I think now Coach Rodriguez wants to backfill that position group with some freshmen that he can get into the system, get them bigger, faster, stronger, develop them to then be able to produce maybe, sooner rather than later. And again, you got to figure it out with what's coming in with this year's high school and JUCO class. But big picture, now that I've talked about those 2 specific groups, I think what Coach Rodriguez has done I think what they're trying to do is they're trying to put themselves in a position where they, at least for right now, aren't held hostage by any one player at any one group, that West Virginia can be, how do I want to say this? Not conservative's not the right word, but if any player feels as if he is putting the me and his interests before the betterment of the team to go test the waters in free agency, that West Virginia can do kind of like what it did this past offseason for a player, and I'm thinking like specifically Ben Bogle, that if it's like, okay, you don't want to be here, you want to test the waters to make more money from an SEC team or a Big Ten team, sayonara, we have somebody who can fill your spot. It's not like you're going to have to technically overpay for a position. I think that's going to require someone to then, step up who's younger and in the system. But I'm just looking at it in totality. I think that's what held back Neil Brown pretty much from like 2021 on, is that he was so scared of players, thinking they were bigger than West Virginia, kowtowing to their demands, how they ran, everything within the program, because he didn't have the kind of NIL money to compete or this or that. And that's partially on Neil Brown. I don't want this video to be a referendum on Neil Brown, but it just, the reality of the situation is that I think West Virginia is in a different spot in NIL with revenue share, the investment into the program because of the outside donor support that Coach Rodriguez has politically, has gotten now, that West Virginia can fully build out a team. And they're taking the approach right now that quantity matters more so. You still have to have the quality, but it's to be determined quality. Like, what did West Virginia do best during the mid-2000s? It found guys who were diamonds in the rough and turned them into gems. Took a 3-star in Pat White, who was supposed to play wide receiver at LSU, put him at quarterback, and he turned into one of the most dynamic players, if not the most dynamic player in program history. Steve Slayton was a guy who lost his scholarship to Maryland, who West Virginia was able to receive the commitment from whenever they had in the same class got Jason Waltney, 5-star, highest-rated prospect in program history. Instead, it was Slayton, not Waltney, who was the one who scored 50 touchdowns as a college football Hall of Famer. Or an Owen Schmidt, a Division III transfer from Wisconsin Whitewater, breaking face masks all over the place, and he's a star. Like, that's the thing. There's so much I still think to be determined with this roster, and who are guys who are going to kind of come out of the woodwork. Like I've heard on a couple of interviews now, Coach Rodriguez really likes Andrew Paldrell, the nickel safety from UNLV. And I mean, who's Andrew Paldrell? Not highly recruited, playing at UNLV of all schools this past year, and the way he speaks of them thinks that he could be like a day one starter, it seems like. So that's what I mean to say is before we start, parceling and everything into this 2027 high school recruiting class, and it's, if it's 15 commits and West Virginia gets to 30, we're halfway there. So still a lot to be had. But for right now, I just think that West Virginia is putting a precedence on speed at all levels, and it's not just talk now by the coaching staff. The proof is in the pudding that they're going and getting players who maybe more athletes, at least for right now, that they're going to coach up in certain positions. But speed kills, and you hear some people say speed can't be taught. So with what they did in investing in the offensive line this past cycle, now they're focusing on, for this year, at least at the high school level, wide receivers and linebackers. I guess you could throw that interior line in there too for, so front seven. So how do you feel about this class so far? If you've been following some of the action, Mountaineer Nation, on On3 or your other favorite recruiting site out there, that's kind of my thoughts, big picture on it. And I think it's going to look a whole lot different in about 6 months whenever we're able to figure out kind of who are the stud playmakers that are underclassmen that prove themselves this upcoming regular season for West Virginia football, to then show what's the roster going to look like and kind of project it, and what are West Virginia's holes that it has, needs, where it can fill for volume out of the high school ranks. So let me know how you're feeling about it, good, bad, or indifferent. Leave your comments here on YouTube. And please like this video once again so more Mountaineer fans can see it. Love to have you subscribe to my channel. And we'll be back later this week to talk about the College Baseball World Series and how far this team can go in Omaha. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell your dog that I do this each and every week, and I have a lot of fun doing it. Hail West Virginia. Let's go.